This is Mark Fraunfelder from BoingBoing.net. Today I interviewed Ernest Cline, the author of a forthcoming science fiction novel called Ready Player One. Here's how the publisher describes Ready Player One. Ready Player One opens in the year 2044. Like most of humanity, Wade Watts escapes a grim, poverty-stricken reality by spending his waking hours jacked into a sprawling online utopia known as the Oasis, where you can be anything you want to be, and where you can live and play and fall in love on any of 10,000 planets. And, like most of humanity, he is obsessed by the ultimate lottery ticket. Somewhere within this alternate reality lies hidden a series of fiendish puzzles that will yield massive fortune and remarkable power to whoever can unlock them. For years, millions have struggled fruitlessly to attain this prize, knowing only that the riddles are based in the culture of the late 20th century. And then Wade unlocks the first puzzle. Suddenly the world is watching, and Wade finds himself embroiled in a desperate race to claim the ultimate prize, pitted against powerful opponents who are willing to commit very real murder to gain control of the Oasis. If he's going to survive, Wade may have to leave behind his perfect virtual existence and face up to the real world he's been terrified of for so long. Genre-busting, ambitious, and irresistibly charming, Ready Player One will speak directly to the geek inside every reader, to those who thrilled to Neil Stephenson's metaverse in Snow Crash, drooled over Lev Grossman's reimagining of fantasy tropes in The Magicians, or happily lost themselves in the detailed worlds of Harry Potter or James Cameron's Avatar. Thanks a lot for taking time to talk to me.
Dude, thanks for your enthusiasm about my book.
Oh yeah,
that's like high praise.
Oh cool. Well, it is. It's amazing. It's an amazing book, and I finished it last night. I was kind of like pacing myself because I didn't want it to end, and I was like, very bittersweet finishing the book because like a lot of people have said, I was like living inside that book, and to be knocked out of it is kind of a letdown.
That's so good to hear, man.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people agree with me. Actually, the pre-publication buzz has been pretty incredible. I mean, I get tons of advanced reader copies all the time in the mail, and this is I think this is the first time I've seen like a letter from the publisher bound into the advanced copy. Molly Stern, the publisher of Crown, is like comparing it to a Tolkien novel.
I know. And I don't know how to deal with those kind of comparisons. Were you comparing it to, or just mentioning Snow Crash in the same breath? That's like one of my favorite books of all time. So it really freaks me out to, and being compared to Tolkien or Princess Bride is pretty amazing. So
yeah,
I'm still getting used to that.
Yeah, I'll bet. I mean, and I think the publicity is just going to increase, as more and more people get their hands on these advanced readers copies. I was just, I'm really interested in kind of the story behind the book. Like, was there any kind of particular incident that gave you the idea to write Ready Player One?
A particular incident. Well, it's kind of. People say when you write your first book, everybody kind of throws in their whole life, and so it's just and I grew up reading science fiction novels and wanting to try my hand at a novel someday, but ended up tackling screenwriting first, and found that screenwriting was a lot less fulfilling than I thought it was going to be. Mm-hmm. And I also realized after Fanboys that Hollywood was never going to let me geek out at the level that I really wanted to. Like, there was no way that I was ever going to get a movie made that was, kind of drilled down as far into geek culture as I wanted to go. And so doing it as a novel seemed like the way to go. But I worked on this book off and on for like a long time. I think about 6 or 7 years in between other screenwriting projects. I would stop and work on a screenplay and then go back to the book, and it was really an ambitious book for my first book, and for a long time I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to pull it off. So it was the result of my second screenplay being sold that allowed me to kind of work on it full time for a year, and that was when I finally finished it. It was about a year and a half ago. But what was your question was about that? And what was the initial impetus? I think was it was just kind of a combination of growing up with video games, and they tell you to write, when you write your first book, you should write the book that you've always wanted to read. And I think it was just kind of an idea, a combination of like combining, like, what if Willy Wonka was a video game designer was my first idea, and also, and that immediately led into the idea of like Easter eggs, and instead of having people tour his factory, a video game designer would create, a video game Easter egg as his way to like find a worthy successor. So I think that was the initial idea, but that I built on. I'm rambling, dude.
No, this is great. This is great. You're answering the question that I wanted to know. When you wrote it, and who was the first person to read the complete draft, and what kind of feedback did you get?
It was my brother was the very first person that I showed it to, and he loved it, and was really enthusiastic and encouraged me endlessly. But he's my brother, so I didn't know if I could trust his opinion. But I have a lot of writer friends that I showed it to, and they were all really encouraging, and they loved it. And it was very similar to other stuff of my spoken word stuff and my my screenplays for like fanboys and other stuff that people had read. So they knew it was kind of very much in my wheelhouse, but but I'd never gone this far. I'd never really geeked out this much. They say that when you write a novel, you kind of reveal, whether or not you mean to, you reveal everything about yourself. And so now there's no hope of hiding what a huge geek I am in the world. Everybody's going to know.
Did the final draft change significantly from the first draft that you wrote?
No, because I really it was kind of in a state of being incomplete for a long time, and so I had a lot of time to think about it, and I would stop working on it for months at a time to think about it or go work on another project. But I would always come back to it because I always believed in the story, and I knew that I would always finish it someday, even if it was just to please myself. So there was never really in the I think the difference between like the final, like the advanced reader's copy that you got and the first draft that I gave to my agent, it's just a lot cleaner. There's just I'm going through the editing process, but the story in and of itself is pretty much the same. It didn't really change a lot through the editing process. It just got cleaned up. It
seems to me that it's very tight. The plot and the beats of the book and how it flows just really works well. Did you write it with an outline in mind, or was there a process of discovery as you went along?
Well, I think one of the reasons it took me so long to finish was initially it was a little too ambitious. I had 7 keys and 7 gates, and then I just kept getting lost in the story. Even I couldn't handle that much, and so and I got really frustrated. And then I decided to scale it way back and make it simpler, and then it became kind of manageable. It was still really difficult, and I always had the specter of Snow Crash hanging over my head because it was one of my favorite books. It was like a seminal book for me, and for a long time, I think I was worried that no one's ever going to be able to write a virtual reality novel as perfect and great as that one. So, but I realized that my book would end up being very different from that, and also kind of an updating of that idea because that book, was written in the early '90s. So,
sure.
I don't know. I've lost my train of thought.
No. I don't think anybody's going to have a problem with another novel being in a metaverse-like world because you did something that's completely cool and original with it. When I was reading the book, one of the things that was really fun to do was I kept my iPhone with me, and whenever I saw a cultural reference, something about a Rush song or an album cover, where you're describing the cover of an old Trasher 80 computer cartridge or something, I would look at it, and read your description of that red beam in it, and that was a real pleasure, kind of finding out more about the stuff in the book. And I was wondering how much of those old computer games and other cultural references that are in the book were part of your life, and how much of it was kind of based on just research you did, now.
They were all, well, the ones, they were all a part of my life. The only way that I was able to maintain my interest working on the book for so long was to write about all the stuff that I loved. So I had a TRS-80 color computer too when I was a kid, and Dungeons of Daggerath was one of my favorite games. I was obsessed with that game for years, and would even as an adult, I would go dig out my old TRS-80 and hook it up just to replay, these old text adventure games that I love. But Dungeons of Daggerath specifically, Zork, I was obsessed with forever. Rush. Anybody who's seen Fanboys would know that I'm obsessed with Rush. Is my favorite band, so I wanted to, include them. So, and Blade Runner, all of that stuff is, I didn't really have to do a lot of research. I would kind of do research just to check to make sure I was remembering things correctly, but it all, putting together the puzzles and working all that just came out of everything that I love. So it was, I don't know if that was just laziness on my part or just wanting to because I really wanted the book to celebrate everything that I, that I love, that I know that other people in kind of the culture that I've grown up to be a part of would also love. So that was, the research didn't really influence my my choices. That all just came out of stuff that I love. Yeah,
that's cool. And I also like that some of the references you don't have an over connection, like Harry Tuttle, the name popped up. That's great. I love that.
And I love it when people spot it. It's so much fun because you don't telegraph that it's a reference, but some people will catch it, and they really that helps them, that they connect with the book in a way that I never imagined. Just a few people have mentioned the Brazil references, or they caught a Breakfast Club reference or whatever, and it really affects people in a way that is amazing to me.
Yeah,
because they connect with it at a personal level because you mentioned something from their childhood. But I was just mentioning something from my childhood that was dear to me, but because of we were all kind of raised on the same movies and television, even in other countries. I've been talking with my publishers in Norway. And these guys, even though they grew up in Norway in the 80s, they still had all the same video games and all the same, movies and stuff that we had. And they had to learn English so that they could, enjoy them. So those, the references, the cultural references have really, traveled well to my shock.
It's really cool. I mean, this is kind of the first novel I've read that captures what kind of people like us are all about and our interests, and I think that's why it just resonated with me so strongly, was that it's just I was reading about my life, and growing up in the 80s and all the same kinds of things I did, and it just nailed it. And I think it's interesting that really I haven't seen anyone else ever capture it as fully as you did, without making it gratuitous or anything. It's really woven into, as it's an integral part of this fantastic adventure story. So now I'm gushing, but it really works.
When when I saw somebody sent me your tweet about where you had quoted the Wade's talking about his obsession with cute girls playing ukuleles, and his fetish for that, and that comes directly from Boing Boing, seeing ukulele videos posted on Boing Boing for the past 5-10 years, and so that was so cool that you caught that, and that's actually a Boing Boing reference without telegraphing it, but that's where that's where my own ukulele cute girls playing ukuleles fetish comes from.
That's awesome. Yeah. I'm glad there's at least one other person in the world that shares that.
True.
So I'm kind of interested in what books have had the biggest influence on you, both as a writer and as kind of giving you an outlook on life.
Huge Kurt Vonnegut fan. His books really meant a lot to me when I was growing up, and still do. And but when I was a kid, I was kind of obsessed with Roald Dahl and Willy Wonka and James and the Giant Peach, and I loved kind of his oppressed young protagonists who are in a horrible situation, and then they go on a fantastical adventure. So I think I definitely borrowed some elements from various Roald Dahl stories, but seminal book for me was Snow Crash. That book just rocked my world. And must have read it, 36 times. Neuromancer also, a lot of William Gibson's early books were a huge influence on me, but and Douglas Adams, like the whole Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, like I love those books. So I would say like as far as like influencing Ready Player One and inspiring me to want to try to write, like those guys like Vonnegut and Adams and Neil Stephenson.
Mm-hmm. Did you like know the Austin kind of cyberpunk contingent of the 80s and early 90s, like Sterling and I guess Gibson was in Vancouver at that time, but
yeah, no, I know Bruce. I've never met Bruce Sterling. I know that he lives here in town, and I knew that he was kind of Austin's my favorite city in the world, and especially for being a movie geek. It's just like the greatest town to live in, both for technology and for like movies and just enjoying pop culture. So I've never found a city that's quite like it. And I'm really good friends with Harry Knowles, which comes in really handy, like getting to see, early like movie previews. And it seems like the whole world comes to Austin, technology and movies and music. So it's my favorite place. But is Bruce Sterling still has a house here? Does he live here?
I think he spends a lot of time in Serbia.
Oh, okay.
Now he's pretty much moved out of Austin now, but
that's good. And I can lay claim.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So from what I've read, there was a big bidding war for the movie rights to Ready Player One. What was that like?
That happened the day after the book. Bidding war. So that was the craziest 48 hours of my whole life, because I've been working on this book, for a long time, and finally finished it, and just really wanted to get it published. I didn't have like grand expectations. I thought, well, this, if I can get it published and it finds its audience, I know there are people out here who will really dig this story, but it never occurred to me to think of it that it would have mass appeal. So I was really shocked once I started talking to all these different editors at different publishing houses who really connected with it. And my first thought was, wow, there just must be a lot of geeks in the publishing industry in New York. I'm just shocked, but they all, and they all seemed to connect with the book and it helped them, relive their childhood in some small way. So, that really freaked me out, but I never imagined that there would be a bidding war for the rights to the book. So my family and I were still in shock for that when they told us that same night that Paramount was already interested in the film rights, and then by the next morning, like the whole next day, was when a bidding war started for the movie rights. And the whole reason, which was really ironic and freaked me out, because the whole reason I think I wrote Ready Player One as a book, because I wasn't sure how it could ever work as a movie, because the pop culture references are, you can just mention something in a book and it's not a problem, but if you want to show something in a movie, that's, it's a whole other like copyright issue. So,
yeah.
Sure. And I wanted to write a book that was, that acknowledged the existence of all of pop culture, and integrated that into the story. So I was shocked that Hollywood, was interested in it. And then, so after writing it as a book, because that's how I wanted it to be, then I immediately, as soon as I finished the book, had to start reimagining it as a screenplay, which was really difficult. But that actual, that 2-day period I can't imagine it will ever be topped in my life for just sheer insanity, because it was not at all what I was expecting. Like, if you had told me, 2 days earlier that was going to happen, I wouldn't have believed you. I've had like a year to get used to it. I still can't believe that happened.
Yeah, super. So are you actually writing the screenplay too then?
Yeah, because I had already was established as a screenwriter with Fanboys and this other screenplay that I had sold to Lakeshore called Thundercade. They made it into my deal that I would to sell the movie rights, that I would get to write the first 2 drafts of the screenplay.
Cool.
It's Warner Brothers, so there will be other writers working on it after me, but by getting the first crack at it, I was able to kind of influence the direction that the adaptation went in and try to protect the things that were important to me about the story as much as I could. There were a lot of concessions. It was the hardest writing job of my life, was trying to adapt Ready Player One. After I'd been working on it a year, for years, and then nonstop for a year, getting it exactly where I wanted it, and then I had to kind of stop and then completely reimagine it as a big budget Hollywood summer tentpole.
Yeah. I'll bet that was really tough. So we haven't really talked a lot about one of my favorite characters. Was interesting in the book is Halliday himself, the creator of Oasis, and he like dies in the first sentence of the book. But he's like, I would say second to the protagonist, to Wade. He's like the most important character in the book. Did you base him on anyone other than you mentioned Willy Wonka?
Another big influence was Richard Garriott. Richard Garriott also lives here in Austin.
Yeah.
I grew up going to Gen Con every summer, and he used to be there with Origin Systems promoting Ultima games and Ultima Online, and he used to do these live action haunted houses that were famous in Austin, where he would open up his mansion in Austin at Halloween and hire fire eaters and jugglers and performers and turn his house into kind of a live action walkthrough dungeon. He's just an amazing guy. I mean, he went paid to go into space, last year. He was just an amazing guy and an example to me of what a really a brilliant, ambitious geek could do, with a lot of money. And what would you do, if what would I do if I had that kind of money? And he was a big inspiration. I sent him a copy of the book and told him as much that, in my mind, Halliday was kind of a combination of Howard Hughes near the end of his life and Richard Garriott.
That's cool.
Yeah, because Richard Garriott and some elements of Halliday's backstory about him creating his first game for his friends that he played Dungeons and Dragons with, and then selling it at the local computer store. That's all stuff that Richard Garriott did when he was made the first Ultima. So
that's cool.
Yeah.
I loved I played the Ultima games on my Apple IIe and loved them.
Man. Those games were like nuclear bombs dropped on my childhood of awesomeness. I couldn't, the first Ultima game when it at some point it becomes science fiction and there's a space battle. I was just blown away by all of his games, and really he made me want to be a game designer. I ended up finding out I don't think the aptitude to be a game designer, but he I really admired his stuff.
Yeah, I just remember one of them had an awesome cloth map and a little metal ankh.
Feelings, yeah. They when I always loved that with old PC, computer games, when they would give you kind of tangible items that kind of fit into the story, and that was a lot of that was what I was trying to convey, is that magic of trying to solve a game. When I was a teenager, and the way that felt, where I felt like I was really, embarking on that adventure, and that was a feeling that I wanted to kind of convey in Ready Player One if I could.
Yeah, it's cool. Do you play games now?
You're interrupting Portal 2 right now, Mark. Totally about to kick Gladys's butt. So,
cool.
I kind of am addicted to Quake Live. A little bit. I still like the first-person shooter, jump in and play a little bit, but I also like longer. I love all of Valve stuff. Half-Life 2, I love, and the Portal games, and so I still, when I have a toddler. I have a 3-year-old kid now, so I don't have as much time to game
cuts in.
Yeah, but I still do, yeah. And I have an Xbox. Maybe I shouldn't say this. I have a hacked Xbox that has pretty much every 20th century video game on it. I can just scroll through and select the console, Super NES or Famicom or Atari 5200, and then I have all the ROMs, so I can just play pretty much any game. And I have MAME set up too, so yeah, I nerd out on my old classic video game collection quite a bit.
That's really cool. I love the way that as the internet matures, every cultural artifact and ephemera from any decade becomes more and more available, and you can just dial into any decade you want and just live in it.
I know, it's awesome, and it was really helpful in the writing of Ready Player One, because if I ever wasn't sure about something or wasn't sure if my memory was correct, I could instantly pull up a video clip or an audio clip or a detailed Wikipedia entry about it, or all the information that I needed to to verify, the ideas that I had was right there at my fingertips. I don't know if I could have written Ready Player One, like 10 years ago. Well, I personally, I know that I couldn't have, but just the resources that I, had at my disposal, I think, definitely fed into the quality of the book and how accurate the references were and stuff.
Yeah, there's some great, there's a YouTube walkthrough for the Atari 2600 Adventure game that a guy did that's really good, and he's really funny too. He's got a great sense of humor. Yeah, it's awesome. So what are you doing now? Like, are you working on another novel, or?
I am. Well, I just earlier this month finished my work on the screenplay for Ready Player One. So I've been kind of living in Ready Player One, for like a year and a half now, working to finish the book and then going right into the screenplay. So now I'm taking a little bit of a break and starting to do a lot of book promotion stuff for August. But I have an idea for like a little indie movie that I want to direct. That's kind of like my Dazed Confused, but it's set in the 80s. And it's all about kind of the birth of geek culture in the 80s and growing up in the midst of all that. I really want to do like a geek 80s Stand By Me, kind of movie. And if the book does well, I'm hoping that, somebody in Hollywood will give me a few $2 million to go make this little nerdy movie. And like Ready Player One, which I think is probably the geekiest novel ever written, this would be like even more so, this would be like just a nerdgasm for, 2 hours. So that's the next thing that I'm working on. But, and I also have ideas for, and that in some ways could be a prequel to Ready Player One, in that, it is set in the same, town, Middletown, Ohio, that Halliday and Morrow, grew up in. So there would be some connection. It wouldn't be like a direct prequel, but it kind of would be in the same geeky universe as my book. So that's what.
That sounds cool. Good luck with that. I really hope that happens.
I hope so too.
Well, Ernie, thanks so much for taking time to talk to me about this. And I'd love to reconnect with you before the book comes out, like maybe for a follow-up interview and closer to pub date.
Thanks,
and good luck with everything.
Good. All right, take care, man.
Okay, bye-bye.